2 weeks before Christmas, but here the temperature is in the 80s and the humidity is about 90%, so it's not very pleasant for human beings. But it is ideally suited to these creatures, leaf-cutting ants. The trouble is that where they thrive, crops don't. The ants devastate the foodstuffs that are planted by man for himself or his domestic animals, so that the poor farmers of the West Indies can simply go to the wall, and the cattle ranches of South America are robbed of hundreds of thousands of acres of valuable grazing land. But in fact, these ants are neither in the West Indies nor in South America. They're in a hut on the roof of the University College of North Wales at Bangor, and they're being studied by Dr. Malcolm Cherrett and others of the Department of Applied Zoology.
Here you've got an animal that is a pest of forestry, it's a pest of horticulture, it's a pest of agriculture. People find it a problem in pastures, and the nests even occasionally produce structural problems by undermining roads and houses. So it's very wide in the range of damage it does. And it's been estimated to cost something like $1,000 million US a year, which would put it in the same sort of league as locusts. There's two main genera, two main groups of ants that you could really call leaf-cutting. One is the genus Atta, the other is the genus Acromyrmex. And then within these two genera, there's about 30 species causing damage. And these are widely spread from the southern United States right through Central America and through a good deal of South America, with the exception of Chile, right down to northern Argentina.
They swarm from hidden nests to devour the citrus fruits of the West Indies. In the jungles of South America, they destroy the manioc, a basic food for the Amerindians. Cocoa plantations are wiped out. Further south, other species steal the grass from under the cattle's noses, and their huge nests undermine the ground so much that horses, even Land Rovers, can fall into them. And even trees aren't safe from these immensely adaptable creatures' jaws.
In forestry situations, you can chop down the initial forest, harvest it, and then you put lots of young trees in. Well, you've got these very big nests which can survive the chopping down process quite well because they're so deep underground. And if you've got 4 or 5 big nests, the forest has been cleared, there's been nothing for them to feed on, and then you walk in and put 2 or 3 nice little trees and plant them in as saplings. Well, the ants enjoy this.
What's so remarkable is that an insect only half an inch long can cut its way through leaf and stem, however tough they may be.
The method of cutting out the leaf pieces is quite interesting because they use their jaws rather like an old-fashioned tin opener. They push one jaw through the leaf, or at least keep it on the underside of the leaf. They leave the other jaw on the upper surface of the leaf, and then they rock their head backwards and forwards in just the same way that those old-fashioned tin openers, you may remember, worked. Now, as they stand on the leaf and cut in a semicircle around themselves, this produces 2 effects. Firstly, of course, they've got to be careful not to cut themselves completely off and fall down. And as they come to the end of the cut, they usually put a leg or 2 onto the main part of the leaf so that they can cut the piece free. The second consequence of this is that the animals in general cut a piece of leaf which is comparable with their size. They use their legs rather like a pair of compasses. So the big ants reach further and cut larger semicircles than do small ants. There's usually, it's thought, only 1 queen per nest. Although when you see the size of the nests and you appreciate that an individual nest can perhaps have 3 or 4 million workers, this is an amazing reproductive feat for 1 queen. Then there are soldiers, very large workers that specialise in nest defence. Then you get a series of sizes of workers moving down from the big soldiers down to very small minims. And they do different jobs in the nest, basically.
Now, they're leaf-cutting ants, we know, but why do they cut leaves?
Well, this was originally a tremendous mystery, and people in South America had seen these troops of leaf-cutting ants carrying leaves back to the nest. It was originally thought they used them for thatching the nest inside. People again thought that they ate the leaves, but it was Thomas Belt in 1874, one of the great Victorian naturalists, who stumbled on the real solution. And it seems that they use the leaves, chew them up, and use the material as a compost on which they grow a fungus. And the fungus is the main thing they eat. Although recently we've established that they do suck a good deal of sap out of the plants during the process of cutting the leaves and of chewing it up for the fungus to grow on.
So they're really a kind of gardener?
Yes, indeed. In fact, this particular fungus is not known anywhere else except in leaf-cutting ant nests. And so, as it occurs only in these nests, there's considerable problems for the ants to move the fungus every time a new nest is founded.
The ants' gardens in the ground are matched to the needs of each particular species.
It's very variable in size and shape, depending upon the species. So that some, the acromyrmex we were talking about, only build little nests, perhaps a square metre or so in extent. Other nests, the big atta species, will build a nest 250 square metres in surface area, perhaps 5 metres deep.
The size is overwhelming. This city centre restaurant will seat over 100 people, and with a 15-foot ceiling, it's a very big room. It's half the size of a big atta nest. Within the nest are up to 1,000 linked chambers, some big enough for a man to sit in. And within those mostly football-sized chambers are the ants' spongy gardens. Elaborately built, the insects even seem to have installed air conditioning.
There's got to be some air circulation. And again, they've got a problem because they want the air to go through the nest, but they don't want water to go through the nest. And if you think of it, it's not easy digging a nest perhaps 4 or 5 metres deep in an area liable to flooding, because this could be instant death. And so the chambers in which the fungus garden is kept, it appears, although the tunnel normally enters from the base, this means that if it floods with water, you get an airlock, like a diver's air bell. And so, at least for a while, the chamber is kept free of water. That, of course, makes air circulation even more difficult. But it's thought that the activity of the fungus garden produces heat. Possibly all the rubbish that they throw down into these special pits in the bottom, and goodness knows there's no reason why they should do that, that probably produces heat too. And so it's suggested that the cold air enters from the edge of the nest, possibly falls down the edge tunnels, becomes heated up in the fungus gardens and in the waste chambers, and then perhaps comes up through the central part of the nest as hotter air, which then convects out.
In captivity, the route to the refuse dump lies along a piece of nylon cord. The rubbish that the ants are discarding is for the most part pieces of their sponge-like garden that have served their purpose. Spent mushroom compost, in fact. And this careful maintenance of the nest's basic food supply is just another example of the fantastic organisation that benefits both the ants and the tiny plants they live on.
Yes, this is the extraordinary thing about leaf-cutting ants, is the symbiosis, the relationship that has evolved between an insect and a plant, a fungus. This is a quite extraordinary piece of co-evolved behaviour. And these two very separate organisms, a fungus and an insect, have evolved to make use of each other. The ants will lick over the surface of the leaf, lick all the waxes off. They'll chew the leaf up. They will, in chewing it up, get rid of a lot of the chemical defences. And also, in licking over the surface, they will decontaminate the leaf. So from the fungus's point of view, it's got it made. It's got a tame ant which feeds it food prepared in almost the ideal way. From the other point of view, the ant seems to have got a lot of advantages too, because it's employing a fungus which probably is able to destroy quite a lot of the plant's defense mechanisms against insects. The fungus seems to be able to digest a lot of elements in the plant which the insect itself couldn't, and succeeds in turning a good deal of this into protein, so that the fungus is a protein-rich diet for the ant to develop on. And so the upshot of these two organisms is, if you like, an unholy alliance between an ant and a fungus, in which the ant gets the advantage of being able to use a lot of plant species where otherwise it might only be able to use one or two, and the fungus has the same advantage the other way around. But by this cooperation, they've managed to, both of them, exploit a very wide range of plants. And this is what makes them such bad pests.
How does the ant feed on the fungus? Does it just chop them off and eat them like we eat mushrooms, or is there a different process?
No, well, the fungus has got a problem because if it made itself too delicious, it would presumably be completely eaten, and that would be the end of it. If, on the other hand, it tried to defend itself from being completely eaten by the ant would throw it out as no use. So, from the fungus's point of view, it has got a rather awkward tightrope to walk between allowing the ant to eat enough of it, in inverted commas, for the ant to continue to culture it, but on the other hand, not being totally eaten. And the result of this is that the fungus produces special bodies, special hyphae, special parts of the fungus that are inflated, filled with fats and various things, which the ants crop and eat.
Unlikely as it may seem, these ants, gardeners, nurses, soldiers, architects, waste disposal operatives, are all female. Males are only created to help establish a new nest. And the key to this genetic engineering is the ant's completely tyrannical queen.
What we have here is a leaf-cutting ant queen. And as you can see, she's a fairly dramatic animal. She's an extremely large insect, but she has to be because a queen like this can live for perhaps 21 years, and she has to provide all the eggs for the whole colony. Notice that this is a virgin queen. She's still got her wings on. She would normally lose these once she's been on a mating flight and has mated. Notice her large abdomen here, swollen with fat reserves to make eggs. Here you've got her thorax. Here you've got the head with a pair of quite powerful mandibles at the front. And inside there is the infrabuccal pocket, where she keeps fungal hyphae, which she subsequently will regurgitate as the beginning of her new fungus garden. The old nest produces winged male and female sexuals once a year. And these go on a mating flight, which can go very high up into the air, several hundred feet. We think that the males and females mate in mid-air in most cases, certainly in the case of the genus Atta. And it's also thought that each queen mates with 4 or 5 males. She probably needs this because if she's going to live, and some of these queens do live for 20 years, and she's got to service a nest with 4 million individuals in it, you can imagine that requires a lot of sperm. And certainly the amount of sperm that a queen has within her when she lands would require about 3 or 4 males to provide. So that once she's landed and is fully impregnated, she then begins to dig a hole all by herself. So these ants found the nest alone. The queens found the nest alone.
And the queen brings with her not only the future population, but the basis of their fungus garden too. She feeds over the days before the flight on her usual liquid diet, and the solids, as always, are filtered off. But this time they're not dropped on the floor of the nest. They're stored in that little pouch beneath her jaws, the infrabuccal pocket.
Now, normally, the contents of this pouch are simply spat out and then thrown in among all the rest of the rubbish. But the queen, when she starts her new nest, spits out this little pellet, and it contains enough small pieces of the original fungus garden to be viable. And then she regurgitates a little pellet, starts laying eggs, chews up the eggs, puts quite a lot of these initial eggs onto the fungus garden, and it begins to grow and feed on the chewed up eggs and on her feces, which she produces, her waste products. As the fungus garden begins to grow, so more and more of the eggs she lays begin to develop and are not chewed up. And then after a few weeks, these hatch out to produce the first workers. And from that point onwards, she increasingly becomes an egg-laying machine, and the workers take over the whole business of running the nest.
But it's believed the queen controls the ant society. What role larvae like this will play when they emerge from the later pupal stage into their final adult form will probably be determined by what they're fed on and it's likely that the queen gives instructions on how they're to be fed by passing on pheromones, chemical messages. Then, once a year, male and sexual females are created. These giant winged females are carefully fed and tended by the other castes, ready for the day when they and the short-lived males will swarm into the air together. There's no sentiment, no affection in an ant's nest, only mechanical relationships aimed at survival. Does that make them an invincible enemy?
They're not too difficult to wipe out if you've got the right chemicals there at the right time. In practice, they're very difficult because of their tremendous powers of reproduction. So that although you can kill an individual nest, well, fairly easily, I wouldn't say it's all that easy, you just have to keep on doing it. That's the trouble. In fact, the whole history of leaf-cutting ant control is almost a sort of chapter of desperation. As every new thing has appeared, people have tried it, so that every insecticide that's ever been produced has been pumped down leaf-cutting ant nests at one time or another. Initially, people, the Amerindians, used to use what they called puddling. This was diverting a stream of water onto the surface of the nest, or even just taking barrels of water and pouring it on, and then organising a party on top. And everyone used to dance, and the whole party ended in a great sea of mud, and it was hoped that the structure of the nest was destroyed in this way. This is certainly the most interesting and fun method of controlling leaf-cutting ants, but not, I think, perhaps the most efficient. Another system that used to be very commonly used was gunpowder. This again produced a very satisfying method of controlling leaf-cutting ants, and the effects were quite spectacular, but not particularly successful because the nests can be very big and irregularly shaped, and so you can blow bits of them up and other bits survive quite well. Then people have tried gases, pumping gases down. Almost all insecticides, as they came in, were formulated as dusts and as liquids, and these have been pumped down as dusts or blown down as liquids. And the technique that's been used most recently, and is now really becoming the most important technique, is the use of poison baits. This has got the advantage that you can try and formulate the bait in a very precise way, so that, if possible, only leaf-cutting ants will take it and nothing else. You can use small quantities of insecticide because the ants are collecting poison bait from all over the place and concentrating it in their own nest just where you want it. And finally, of course, you don't have to find the nest. If you're suffering damage, you can put the bait down where the damage is, and the ants will find the bait and take it back home. It's very difficult to make a bait completely specific, but there are all sorts of dodges. I've just recently had a student working on the possibility of leaving the bait in polythene bags, sealing the polythene bags, and then putting the bags down on the leaf-cutting ant trails. Leaf-cutting ants, it seems, can smell the bait through the polythene bag, and they cut the bags open and take the bait away. Well, most other insects don't bother to open polythene bags and take their own food out, and so this, again, makes it reasonably specific.
What sort of foods do you use?
The most commonly used base for leaf-cutting ant baits now is dried citrus pulp. This is the waste from the citrus canning industry. And they seem to like this a lot, particularly when it's been cooked. That's the main one, but we're looking at all sorts of more sophisticated methods, seeing whether in these days of plastics it won't be possible perhaps to make an entirely synthetic bait, which has got in the necessary food attractants, possibly the necessary pheromones, the chemical messengers that the ants produce, and the necessary toxicants to make a very specific bait over which you've got a lot of control in the manufacturing process.
Past research and present knowledge is already being applied to destroy these pests, but the ants still keep plenty of secrets to themselves. The work at Bangor aims to refine our understanding in the hope of greater success in the future.
I think almost every piece of work we do reveals a whole series more questions, and so you always get the impression that you're just turning up more and more questions than you're ever answering. But we obviously do take the opportunity, when we've got the ants here in culture, to use money from other sources, from pure research sources, to do additional work on them. And we've been looking at the animal's biology, their relationship with the fungus, some of their pheromone trails that they lay and so on. So there's a whole series of pure research that we've been doing.
This isn't an attempt to teach ants to read. They ignore the discs numbered 1 and go for the number 2s because these discs have been treated with a chemical attractant. Their instinct fools the ants into seeing these useless bits of paper as just what the colony needs. The same technique can persuade them to take home poisoned bait, which ideally would kill off the queen. But is it really finding its target?
One of the areas we're looking at is the general economy of leaf-cutting ant colonies. Because one of the problems you've got in practice is that you can give a bait to a leaf-cutting ant nest. They'll take the bait in, and a small proportion of the nest will be killed, perhaps only a quarter. The rest will continue to live, and if the queen's there, then the whole nest can continue to grow quite happily after an initial setback. So we're looking at the whole pattern of the movement of materials and chemicals and food through the nest. What are the pathways? How much goes through the fungus garden? How much do the animals regurgitate and feed to their nest mates? What proportion goes to the offspring? And we're doing a lot of this using radio tracers. And hopefully, again, this sort of information will allow us to plan the best and most direct route for a poison to the queen.
Another of the ant's chemical messengers guides the foragers to a source of food, but here its man-made equivalent is leading an ant in unproductive circles. This too might be applied more practically.
People have sometimes said you might be able to use this to divert them from their trail into some other area where you could kill them, but that's very much a long shot. We have, however, found that that scent trail material also attracts the ants to any substance that you put it on. And so we have been including it in baits to try and increase the amount of pickup of the baits.
To an ant, scents are all important. This ant is from a different colony and has lived on different food. As a result, it smells different and it's torn to pieces. Bad news for the ant, but for man it offers another hope for the future.
Well, whether this could be used, I don't know, but of course it would be very nice to think that you could put a particular smell of a foreign colony into a nest, or you could spray some of the workers, and when they went home, they simply then were chopped up by the people already living there. But that, again, is another long shot, but you never know.
In the war against the ants, man's own determination to survive is stretched to the limit. He's faced with a supremely organised enemy for whom Dr. Cherrett has a kind of grudging admiration. They sound, on the face of it, at least as clever as we are, don't they? I mean, do you have any regard for their intelligence?
I've great regard for the incredible behaviour that they've evolved, and I've great regard for the evolutionary forces that have linked an ant and a fungus in the way that they have, and that have linked the lifestyle of the ant to the surroundings in which it finds itself. That is a miraculous piece of evolutionary force. As far as the individual intelligence, I think the ants have got very little room for manoeuvre. And if you once take them outside the setting of the nest, then they can do some very stupid things.
The good news, then, is that the ants can be outwitted, that they can't evolve countermeasures fast enough to save themselves. The bad news is that when there are millions of nests, when each nest can turn out dozens of queens a year, when each queen might lay 4 million eggs, they have the sheer weight of numbers on their side. But the ants' best defense is that they hit the subsistence farmers hardest. Western society might invest more in their destruction if they ever turn their attention to our roses.